Welcome to Jewels of the Trade, the channel for spreading accurate information on jade and gemstones. I'm here with Nathaniel Cook, president of Washington Jade and renowned jade carver, whose carving was featured in Lotus Gemology's Jade, a Gemologist Guide. Welcome back to the channel, Nathaniel.
Hello, thanks for having me again.
Today, we're going to discuss how carvers bring out the cat's eye effect in cat's eye jade. If you missed it, be sure to check out our video with Rodney and Nathaniel from Washington Jade after this video is over. Link is down in the description. Let's get right to it. Nathaniel, what is the first thing a carver has to know before cabbing cat's eye jade?
It doesn't behave like regular jade. You'll have some similarities. The basics are obviously the same. You gotta grind it down with a heavy wheel to start with and start, using progressively finer and finer tools and all that until you get to sanding and getting it down to a 600 grit and then taking it to a 14,000 polish. All of that's the same. The difference is you have to be a lot more gentle with the material, whereas nephrite has a really strong interfelted structure. What gives cat's eye jade its chatoyance is a more felted, layered structure or aligned structure amongst its fibers. So that lends some unique structural properties to the stone that you don't see in nephrite. For instance, I use much gentler wheels when I'm doing my initial reduction. I'll use an inflatable wheel, inflatable drum with a sanding drum around it instead of your standard expanding wheel or metal wheel, just because it's gentler on the stone.
I think some people will be kind of surprised to hear that the cat's eye doesn't just automatically come out in the stone. And in fact, when you have the rough cat's eye jade, can you even tell that it's going to be chatoyant?
Yeah, you can. And that's actually been immensely helpful for us during our exploration. A lot of the reason why I started cutting the stones to begin with is just so I understood what to look for in the field. What causes the actual cat's eye in cat's eye jade is the alignment of its tremolite or actinolite fibers. Yeah, right. Normally they're all gnarled up, and that's what we want to see in standard nephrite, really, really high quality stuff. But with this material, much more aligned, and that's desirable. What you're looking for in the field is you want to see material that when you turn it in the light, it flashes. So it's got a really, really bright color in one direction. And then when you turn it like this, so say you've got a light source coming from above, you start like this, you're getting a flash from the eye because the fibers are aligned like this relative to the light. You turn the stone this way, it's going to be totally dark. You're going to be looking at a totally dark surface here. You can also see that same effect if you look at the same spot in the top of a stone and tilt it in the light. So you'll actually see the color change as you tilt the stone.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, for that actual true cat's eye to appear in the jade, it has to be fashioned into a cabochon. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. You can still see the flash if you faceted it, for instance. It wouldn't look quite right. The eye wouldn't travel across the surface of the stone the same way, but you would still get a flash out of it. I mentioned that you have the aligned fibers. Yes, exactly. I'm going to be doing this a lot. Do this. But yeah, I mentioned that there are aligned fibers in the material. What you're looking for when you're actually cutting a stone and to get that cat's eye effect to come out properly is that you need to orient the stone so that the top of the cabochon is directly in line with these fibers. The dome of the cabochon should be in line with those fibers like this. That way you'll end up with the dark axis on the sides of the stone and the eye that sort of wraps around and across the stone as you move it under the light.
Is it true that you might have a rock that is nephrite jade and some of it might be chatoyant and then some parts of that rock might not be chatoyant?
Absolutely. You do. You see these chatoyant bands form up in standard nephrite. That's how we mine it out, is that we'll pull nephrite boulders out of the ground, we'll look at them and sort of determine about how much cat's eye material do we think is in this particular boulder. And then we'll use that to determine whether we harvest the stone in the first place.
Walk us through the process of carving cat's eye jade. Tell us about the steps and the tools that you use to achieve the end result.
Again, it's a lot of the same tools as with standard nephrite, but the process is a little bit different. With cat's eye jade, you're specifically going after the cabochons. So you're actually wanting to slab the material first so that you can start to get your preforms. There's the added wrinkle of you need to manage the orientation of the stone as you're slabbing it, and that orientation can actually change as you move down through the stone. So you can't necessarily just slab all the way through a stone and expect to have really good results. But yeah, that's the first step, is figuring out where that flash is on the stone. So you tilt it back and forth until you find that perfect angle where it's got that brightest flash when you got the light directly above. And then you can just start slabbing it in that orientation. And then after a couple slabs, take a look, see if the orientation has changed much, readjust it a little bit, put it back in your slab saw and slab off a few more slabs. And then from there, it's just the same as cutting any other cabochon, really. You're just cutting your preforms and getting them on dop sticks, doing your cabbing work. The main difference between the cat's eye jade and nephrite at this point is that you need to be a lot gentler with it. So what I tend to do is, for that first shaping, rather than using a hard metal wheel like a lot of people would with standard nephrite, or an expanding wheel with a sanding drum, I use an actual inflatable wheel. It's kind of funny. You put a bike pump on the end of it to pump it up.
Wow.
And then it's got a little sanding drum that you put around it. You get these from, give a plug to David Clayton with jadecarver.com. The hardness of the stone is different from the top to the sides. Those inflatable sanding drums are not super slow on shaping. You can actually shape in a reasonable amount of time using those. And once you've done that, the process is almost identical. You just have to make sure you don't build up a lot of heat when you're polishing the stones.
Since you mentioned hardness, we've actually gotten quite a few comments asking details about the hardness of the Washington Cat's Eye Jade. Can you sort of explain in detail the range of hardness and how you determined it?
We had a couple of people asking after the last interview, so I actually went and did a formal test, as much as you can do that with hardness testing. But I happened to have a polished piece of rough and tested it a little bit. I wasn't able to get scratches on it pretty much anywhere with a 6. So it seems to maintain hardness above a 6 pretty uniformly, which is what you'd expect from basically any nephrite. I'm actually a little surprised. I would have expected it might dip a little bit below 6, but it's a pretty high quality material. So I'm not really that surprised that it stays 6 and above. I tried a 7 and it will scratch on the surface of the stone. So the hardness again changes with the fiber orientation. It's going to be a little bit softer along the tops of these fibers, and then really, really hard at the ends of the fibers. When I test those sections, some sections were scratching at a 7, some weren't. It seems like it can go above a 7. I would imagine that's probably not the norm, but it's not that much higher than typical nephrite, which is a 6.5.
You have actually a really incredible story as a jade carver. Can you just talk a little bit about what it was like getting into that and your accomplishments as a carver?
I went to Camp Brotherhood. It's a camp that the Northwest Stone Sculptors Association up here in Washington and Oregon runs every year. It's like summer camp for stone carvers. So everybody goes out there for a week. Yeah, I know. It's a lot of fun. So everybody gets out there for a week, gets all dusty and carves their stone of choice. But Deborah Wilson, a master carver from Vernon, British Columbia, comes down every year and teaches in the Jade tent. I took Deborah's workshop that year and was sort of hooked. People seemed to think that I had an aptitude for carving, and we needed somebody to assess our materials anyway, so I just kept going. The jades we were getting out didn't have the sort of poor reputation that Washington jades have had historically, of being very layered and not super carvable. So after a couple of years of doing that with the company, alongside all of the other stuff that goes along with mining, I got a chance to go to Suzhou and attend the Zhejiang Bay carving exhibition over there with a lot of the biggest names in Western jade carving. All of the big name carvers go. It's like Deborah Wilson, Rick Moore. I believe Rick Moore has attended in the past, Dale Blankenship. And of course, this whole thing is organized by Andrew Shaw. He has done a great job of putting this whole thing together. They put together this thing that feels like summer camp for jade carvers.
So cool.
We all get to go there for sort of a retreat for like a week and a half, talk to each other, trade notes with the Chinese master carvers and each other. The first year I was over there, we had all of our stuff judged, and I won a bronze medal for one of my sculptures that I entered. I was just sort of blown away to receive an award the first year. They may have been being a little bit generous, but
you were featured in Lotus Gemology's book too, The Dragon Bowl.
Yeah, The Dragon my Dragon Bowl made it into Lotus Gemology's latest book.
Well, I got to see the Dragon Ball in person, and it is really incredible. I mean, it's just absolutely fantastic, and I look forward to seeing more of your work, which kind of brings us to, what do you think the future of the American carving industry is?
We're actually seeing a lot more interest in jade carving generally in the United States the last few years. Granted, the level of interest was quite low. It has been for a long time because jade culture has been in China, and it's just now starting to get out into the rest of, well, the Western world at the very least. I would say there's been probably like a threefold increase in the number of jade carvers in the last few years alone. A lot of people seem to be taking cues from the New Zealanders. A lot of people like that style. They really seem to have a non-Chinese version of the jade market figured out.
Yeah.